friends, it is so good to see you. Welcome back to my channel. I feel like it's been a minute or two since we've been together, and that is probably because, I don't know if you noticed, but I changed my upload schedule. So I will not be uploading on Fridays anymore. I'm now going to be uploading videos on Tuesday. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of get that out of the way and let you all know that if you were expecting a video on Friday and you didn't see one, that's why. I've changed my upload schedule. So today we are going to be working on some fun new projects. Well, new to me anyway. Some decor pieces or a decor style that I personally have never worked with before. It's completely new to me, and I'm really excited because I see these pieces all over the place and I just think they are so lovely. So I wanted to try. I don't know how well they'll implement into my current home decor style, but I feel like if I do it right, we can make it work. And the style that I'm referring to is that French country farmhouse. I just think the colors, especially in the springtime, the colors that I see in these beautiful greens and muted pinks like champagne colors and blush colors are lovely. So let's try some pieces and see if we can make it work. And we're going to be working with a new medium today, a medium that I have never tried, and I am over the moon excited to try this out. It's Airdry clay. Have y'all ever worked with Airdry clay? I have not. This is going to be a first for me, and I'm really excited. I have some great ideas up here. Let's just hope that I can take them from here out to the drawing table and implement them into real life and make them look as pretty as they look up here. Anyway, so without further ado, let's jump into our projects and get started. For our first project today, we are going to be working with some Airdry clay, a brand new medium for me, and I am very excited, but don't completely know what I'm doing. So we are just going to wing it and learn together. I'm wanting to create an envelope of sorts that we can put faux flowers in. That's at least my vision for our first project. The first thing we are going to need to do is trace an envelope pattern onto a piece of cardstock. We'll cut it out and use this pattern for our clay envelope. And I wasn't completely sure what I was doing here, but in the end, it worked out perfectly. Now we'll need to prepare our clay. The clay I'm using here is called Craft Smart Airdry Modeling Clay. There are numerous brands out there, but when I was doing some research, most crafters said this brand was the better one for beginners as it is the easiest to work with. I pull about 1/8 of an inch of the clay from the brick and then roll it in my hands for a few seconds to soften it up. And it is a bit messy, so be prepared for that. And then using a rolling pin, we will roll it out to the approximate size of our pattern. I recommend having a hard surface underneath your clay. I am using a tile, but you can also use a silicone mat or some parchment paper. And you will need to sprinkle some cornstarch over your surface before rolling out the clay to prevent sticking. Flour will not work. It will absorb the moisture that's in the clay and become a gooey mess. You have to use cornstarch for this process.
Now we will lay our pattern on the clay, and using a craft knife or a butter knife will also work just fine for this step, we will carefully cut around our pattern. After cutting this out, I dampened my fingers with a tiny bit of water to smooth out all the edges. Then we will set this aside and cut the top piece that will form the pocket. Okay, y'all, so I did not need to cut the V section out of this pattern. I was figuring this out as I went, and we will just basically be cutting a rectangle here. So don't cut the V part of this pattern. Now we will need to wad up some parchment paper, or printer paper will also work. It just has to have a non-stick surface. So if you use paper, it would be a good idea to cover it with cornstarch first. This is going to form our pocket in the clay, and I hope this makes sense. It'll probably make more sense as we continue on. Next, we will place the small rectangle that we cut out over the stuffing and then mold the sides together until it is completely sealed. And I did wet my fingers slightly to do this step. It is important not to use too much water, or the clay will become wet and very difficult to work with, or it will actually fall apart. Doing my best to smooth this out, but there's probably still going to be some wrinkles in here, and we are just going to embrace the perfectly imperfect of handmade. Okay, y'all, so this is where I realized that I scored my V upside down. So I used this pattern to fix it, and then with damp fingers, I work the clay until the old marks begin to disappear. And we want to make sure that the score marks are deep enough to stay as the clay dries, but don't go too deep because we don't want to go all the way through the clay. And you can use a popsicle stick to do this, or the end of a spoon will work just fine as well. You don't have to have fancy tools like me. I'm just addicted to fancy craft tools. All right, once we have all 3 sides completely sealed and the details are scored into the clay, we will set this aside to dry completely. And mine took about 3 days to completely harden. You can speed this process up in the oven. However, this clay is a bit delicate, and if you over bake it, the clay will crack. So it's best to let it air dry slowly to prevent cracking. Oh, and I almost forgot. I do add a small hole at the top of this, so if you want to hang it from a peg or a hook, you'll be able to. Once our envelope is completely dry, it is now ready to be painted. I am using Waverly chalk paint in the color Celery for this piece. And I do paint the entire envelope front and back and as far into the pocket as I could get with my brush. It was a little tricky. After the paint is dry, I do dry brush some antiquing wax around the edges to give it that vintage flair, and then I seal the entire envelope with Mod Podge. And you could also use a clear spray sealer if you prefer. After letting the sealer completely dry, we can now fill our envelope with as many florals as your heart desires. And I just use a mix of lavender and some greenery and some little white flowers that I had in my stash. And we are done with our first project. I think it turned out adorable. What do y'all think? Next up, we are going to give this little tin bucket a total makeover. And the first thing we're going to do is make a cute little dragonfly clay mold to attach to the front of our bucket. I did find these clay molds to be a tad finicky. If I used too much cornstarch, the clay wouldn't stay in the mold, but if I didn't use enough, then the clay stuck to the mold. It took a few tries to get it just right, but finally I got it and it turned out pretty darn cute. I did find it helpful to use small pieces of clay at a time to fill the mold and then smooth them all together before releasing the clay from the mold. Using the backside of a butter knife really helped with this step. Now I'm going to remove it from the mold, starting at one corner and slowly releasing the clay from the mold. It did also help to bend the mold back as I released the clay, and hopefully that makes sense. Then I touch up all the edges with a small pick, and you could use a toothpick to do this part. I did forget to mention that I bought all of my clay molds at on Amazon, and I will link them down below for y'all. So now we are ready to glue the mold to the bucket, and we need to do this while the clay is still wet. This way when it dries it will keep its shape and mold itself to the bucket. And I am using Tight Bond number 3 to glue this onto my surface. I recommend using a stronghold glue, and it definitely needs to be waterproofed or our mold will not stay adhered to the surface when it dries. Next, I am going to glue some half round wood beads all around the top perimeter of our bucket using hot glue. And I suggest starting in the front and then placing a piece and then another one on the side and another one on the opposite side as you go around. And that way, if there's a gap, the gap will be in the back of the bucket. Hopefully that makes sense. Now I'm going to tape off the handles because we're ready to paint, and I don't want to get paint on the handles. We're going to paint the entire bucket, and I first painted this white but then changed my mind and decided I wanted it to be green. So after the white dries, I do go back over it in Waverly chalk paint in the color Celery. And I do partially paint the inside, but since it's going to be filled with flowers, I didn't see the need to paint the whole thing, like all the way down. Using some white wax and some brown antiquing glaze, I am now going to brush a small amount on and then gently wipe away the excess, and that will get down into all the grooves and really make the details of the clay mold and any imperfections in the bucket pop out. It just gives the bucket a little more life and dimension. Next, we will fill our bucket with an array of flowers. And I do put a small piece of floral foam in the bottom of our bucket to help hold our flowers in place. I wanted this to have a bit of that wildflower feel, so I use a variety of faux flowers and kind of haphazardly place them. I'm definitely not trying to be perfect here. I love it. So dang cute. For our third project, we are going to take some just ordinary glass jars and elevate them into something that looks like $100. I am going to use a similar process as I did with the tin bucket by making some clay molds, and we'll make our molds and glue them onto our jars. Once the molds have completely dried, we can then paint and antique our jars. And I did clean these jars really well with some alcohol to make sure there is nothing that will prevent our paint from sticking. Okay, so this particular mold did give me a little bit of trouble. It was really hard for me to get the feet, and you can see where I do it, and then when I go to peel it out, the little feet fall off. So I didn't give up. I tried a couple times, and we finally got it right. I did sort of have to piece the feet together, and it looks a little bit messy, but that's okay because sometimes with these type of projects, messy is good. Now that our molds are completely dry, we can start painting. And when painting on glass, I suggest giving them a coat of Mod Podge first, or any kind of clear sealer. This will help the paint better bond to our glass surface. So I painted these similar to the antique bucket, or similar to the tin bucket that we made using the same antiquing method. I painted these in Waverly chalk paint in the color Fawn, and then I go over them with some Waverly white wax and some Waverly brown antiquing wax. I brush small amounts on and then wipe away the excess until I have achieved the desired look. Y'all, I really think what elevates these glass jars the most are these fantastic lids. I found them on Amazon, and I will link them in the description box for you. Okay, are y'all sick of crafting yet? I really hope not. I am having a blast and love sharing all these projects and ideas with you. I know we are going through them really, really fast, and this is kind of how my brain works, always thinking about what project I can make next. Anyway, now we are going to spruce up these cute little terracotta pots that I found at Walmart for 50 cents a piece. First, we are going to make a clay tray for our 3 little pots to perch up on. I'm just cutting a long rectangle of clay, making sure it is the correct size to fit our pots. And then we will scallop the edges, folding them up a bit to create a ledge of sorts. While our tray is drying, we can start working on our little pots. And I'm going to, yep, you guessed it, make some clay molds for our mini pots as well. Because first, well, I'm just having way too much fun with air clay right now. And second, why not? Then we will glue, then we will glue the molds onto our pots. And remember, we need to glue them on while the molds are still wet. Once our molds have completely dried, which in real time was approximately 3 days, we will move on to painting. I painted mine in Waverly chalk paint in the color Celery, and at first I painted them entirely in the celery color, but then decided that it would look really pretty to paint the rims in a contrasting color. So I chose Waverly chalk paint in the color Fawn for the rims, and I also painted the insides of the pots. Not that you'll see it once they are filled with flowers, but I kind of got carried away. And then I do the same antiquing process to these as I have been throughout all our other projects. I really like the look of this particular antiquing finish. Once our pots are all painted, then we can fill them up with flowers. And I just used some lavender stems for mine that I found at Walmart, but you can use any flower that you like. Our last and final project will complete this vignette. We will be taking an old frame that I painted in white chalk paint, then decoupage a piece of scrapbook paper to the front of the glass. Then we will glue a single stem floral to the paper. You could also do a bouquet, that would be really pretty. And with Mother's Day just around the corner, I thought if you needed some gift inspiration, any of the projects that we made today would be lovely Mother's Day gifts. I know my mom loves to get handmade gifts. They are so much more special than store-bought.
Oh my gosh, okay, so that was a lot of fun, y'all. So different. We created some projects today that were different from anything I've ever made before in my like decor pieces or just any kind of craft project. And oh my gosh, they all turned out so lovely. I really enjoyed these projects that we made today. I don't even think I can pick a favorite. They all turned out really pretty, but I guess if I had to pick one favorite, I would say it was probably the tin bucket with like just the wildflower arrangement in it, because I don't know, there was just something so sweet about that. So anyway, what was your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. I would really love to hear if you had a favorite out of all those projects. They were a lot of fun. And the Airdry clay, oh gosh, that was so much fun to work with. I think I might be addicted now, and we are definitely going to be doing some more Airdry clay projects in the future. I can hardly wait. I've got some new ideas brewing, and we'll just have to keep playing and see what happens and where we go with it. Anyway, so thanks again, guys, for hanging out with me today. I really enjoyed your company as we created some projects together, especially new things. That's always so much fun to do. So thanks for hanging out with me. I look forward to seeing you all again next week. We are going to do something a little different again next week. I'm going to do I have some refresh projects that I want to do on my studio, just a couple of areas in my studio that need just a little refresh. So that's what we're going to be working on next week, and we're going to do some art together. So anyway, I hope you guys have a fantastic week, and I will see you soon. Bye.